Guten Abend. This is my project card called Mosh Slut brackets new bass comma kick trigger close brackets dash tracks. This is my final mix of the song before mastering it. So I've made a couple differences. One of them is the inclusion of a new kick trigger. In fact, actually two new kick triggers. So I've got a kick low and a kick high trigger. So the high one is using the contact crumb drums. Sounds like that. I've whacked up the Magma Stress Box to 4.31. It's to just make it sound just big, and it almost has like a reverb to it with the release of the compressor. It's not a reverb at all, but it almost sounds like it just because of how long it takes to release. And then I've got some EQ here. Just whacked up the highs and take away all of the lows, so it just sounds like this. Still pretty punchy sounding, but it's lacking all the low end grit to it. And then I have the low one here, which is just using a Magma Stress Box at ratio 3.13, just to make it, sound big and stinky again. So I'm using a acoustic kick. It's called the C11. Let me find it. Should be up here, but it's not really. That's interesting. Okay, well it's called the C11, and it's a very subby sounding kick. It sounds a lot like this. And when the two are mixed together, and then I put in the main kick as well. Sounds pretty damn powerful, which is what I was going for, a really punchy kick. I have messed around a lot with the levels of this track, just to get rid of the peaking on the stereo output, because I wanted to reduce that as much as possible before I master it. Because it's just distortion, it's unwanted for the track. So I tried to fix the levels by just messing with the faders a lot. So a lot of it I've just brought it down a lot and then brought up certain elements that I do want. Like you can see the guitars are really low down. I mean the left one's on negative 27.4, which is really damn low. But yeah, so the things like the toms, I've kept them pretty loud because they just need to be audible in the mix. But yeah, the kick triggers are the main difference, but I have incorporated some bus tracks as well. So I've got a kick bus here using Magma Stress Box 0.61, just using it for expansion to just get rid of some of the bleed. I've then brought up the level just because I think the default is there. Or no, I think it's 6, sorry. So I brought it up to 7. I brought up the high end to the 4.5k to 9 decibels higher, and then I've brought 100 hertz to 4.5 decibels higher, just to get that punch in there. Then I've also compressed it using a vintage FET. I've got 2 1:1 ratio, which means that it's a relatively lower compression, so I didn't want it to be really strong and be taking too much away from the kick, because it's already been compressed in the main kick track. So I just wanted to just tighten the compression a little bit on the bus. I've got the threshold to negative 26.5 decibels, which is sort of a medium threshold. It's not too strong. Like I said, I didn't want the compressor to be going really, really strong. The attack's pretty fast, 0.7 milliseconds. I got the release to 51 milliseconds. Got the distortion to soft because it adds a nice distorted sound to it, which I quite like. But I always find that soft sounds stronger than hard, which is interesting because you'd think that hard distortion would sound more distorted than soft, but no, I always find that soft distortion is more. And then I've got this new plugin effect here. It's called the Fresh Air. I can't remember what group it's from. I'll check in just a second, but it just adds mid to high range EQ. It just makes it sound brighter. So I've used it on the kick here just to make it sound brighter, essentially. The Fresh Air is from Slate Digital. I've also got one called the Heatwave as well, but I've not actually properly used it yet. I've got a snare verb bus. Again, using the Magma Stress Box for the expansion to get rid of any bleed. And then I'm using this saturator here. It's called the Extra Spice Heat. It's got this little feature here that you can that it will listen to the input and select the right input levels for it, which is quite helpful. I've got it set to 55% for the heat and spice set to 13%. Spice tends to bring in a lot of bright end saturation, so I've only used it a little bit because I don't want to go crazy with it, else it will sound way too much. I have also used the Fresh Air again, just to brighten up the mid and high range. Then I've EQ'd it further as well. I got 4.5 K to 3 decibels higher, and then 200 hertz, 9 decibels louder. Then I've also got a reverb, because originally I did have a reverb on my snare track, on the snare top, but I disabled it because I didn't want to use it on the main track. I wanted to use it in a bus. I do still have the one on the snare bottom, but the top snare is no more for reverb. So I've then made a bus on the snare track and just changed the reverb so that it's on the bus instead. It's the same settings as what was on the main track. It's just I put it on the bus instead. My reason for that is because I wanted to keep the dryness of the snare whilst also having a parallel wetness reverb to it. The guitars, I've essentially I wanted to make a guitar bus so I could essentially make the guitars louder and also fiddle with how they sound a little bit. So I've used the Magma Stress Box with a 2.29 compression, so it just sounds bigger and fatter. There's less dynamics between them as well, so it sounds pretty glued together. I've taken down the output a little bit because it was pretty loud. Then again, I've used the Fresh Air, just some more mid and high range. Less high range because it becomes too much else. But yeah, I did attempt to use some stereo spread, but I really did not like its inclusion, so I turned it off. I do have a vocals parallel compression. Again, Magma Stress Box 2.24 just to make it sound big. Less dynamic as well. Then I've also got the Fresh Air on it. Consensus theme. A lot of mid-range frequencies and some reasonable high-end air, if you will. There is a little button here as well, which means you can lock them together so that they both turn up at the same rate, which is quite handy. But yeah, but I've not used it yet. Not properly, at least. I've messed around with it. I've then put a vintage opto on the vocals channel because optos tend to have pretty slow attacks and slow releases. So I wanted to use this one, even though you can mess with the release, and I set it to 65 milliseconds. They're still known for this. I got the threshold set to 2.1.1. I didn't want a really heavy compression on it. I wanted to still keep a lot of the dynamics, but still bring it together. I have got the threshold set to nearly negative 40 dB, which is pretty high. I just found that it sounded better this way. I quite like a high threshold for the vocals, and it complements the vocals. I've then got the distortion set to soft as well again. And then finally I've got some reverb, the Space Designer. The length set to 1.3 seconds. And I've got the initial level set to 50%. And the attack set to nearly 300 milliseconds. And then I've got the end level set about 30%. And the wet's negative 20. I didn't want it too high, but just enough so it adds wetness to the track. I do have one last kick bus. I've called it the kick packet. In the words of Dean, he said it's nice to have a nice punchy, crisp packet sounding effect on a snare. But this time I've used it on a kick, just to bring bright high-end frequencies into it. So it's more noticeable in the mix. When it's, say, not listening with headphones or with speakers, say you're listening to it with a phone speaker, then you can still be able to hear the kick more because there's more high-end frequencies. So because I'm going to be adding a lot of brightness to it, I've used the expansion to get rid of any noise bleed as well. This is going to be especially important on this one because I'm going to be adding a lot more high-end frequencies. So any high-end frequencies that can be heard on the mic, like say from the cymbals or the snare or maybe any of the toms, is going to be a lot more. So I wanted to keep just the sound of the kick and reduce as much bleed as possible without it minimizing the kick. So I found that 0.7 was a good middle ground. I did try and EQ it like this, but it ended up sounded absolutely horrid, so I hated it and I disabled it. I was going to just try and bring just I was going to use a low end cut and a high end cut and just completely get rid of those frequencies, so it's just the higher and mid range, so that I could EQ that, but I didn't like it to use at all, so I got rid of it. And I went back to this old classic favourite instead. 4.5k, 6 decibels louder. I've brought the level up from 6 to 7.5. I've brought 200 hertz up to 9 dB as well. I've got more expansion going on the Magnum Stress box at 0.75, just to get rid of that noise bleed as well. Then I've got a studio FET here with a ratio of 3.6. and a threshold of 25, or 24.5, sorry, and then an attack of 15 milliseconds, again with the soft distortion, because I love using the soft distortion, it sounds fantastic. But yes, the very last thing I did was messing with all the levels, just to make sure it was ready to master. So that meant highlighting everything, and just bringing everything down, until the stereo output was happy enough so that it wasn't going over 0 dB and wasn't introducing distortion or clipping or anything like that. So yeah, I just brought it down, and then if I thought that anything needed to come up, I would bring it up in accordance to that. But yes, on to the mastering.